Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I just finished filming the mystery live stream where I mixed randomly selected colors from the Americolor Nifty 50 kit. And I used a combination of random number generators and dice rolls to pick these mixtures. This time the numbers on the chalkboard don't mean as much necessarily right away. The final circled number is the total number of food coloring drops, and then the orange numbers correspond to the number in the box that I picked. So like this would be number 4, this one is number 50, and then the number of drops I used of each one. I will update the video description of both the live stream and this recap to have the color names and the number of drops of each one, so that way you know how I mixed these colors. But let's go take a look quickly at the wet yarn. Here are the 9 yarns that we dyed in the live stream. We have a mixture of some warm terracottas, some deep burgundies, browns, purples, another like deep purple, and whew, I think in general these colors skew warm. All of them definitely have some red in it, and I think that if I had kept the rules to 2 to 3 colors at a time from the beginning, maybe we would have gotten some cooler tones like some blues or greens. But this kit just has so many warm colors, reds and oranges and colors that have red in it, like the blacks and browns, that I'm not surprised to see a lot of red in these wet colors. Now, I need to go wash these yarns. The downside of the Americolor food coloring kits are that they contain titanium dioxide, which is a white powder that is helpful if you want to shift your off-white buttercream to more of a pure white. But when you're dyeing yarn, it's just something that you need to rinse out. And that's the reason why some of the pots looked a little milky. I was pleasantly impressed by the potency of these colors. In all of these, we ranged from 26 to 93 drops of food coloring. But the number of drops does not dictate how much food coloring was in the mixture. That depends on how intense the color is. Think of black versus pale gray, but also the size of the drops. And that is my biggest Americolor complaint, that some of them drop really easily. Some of them are so viscous that it is really hard to count the number of drops that you get. And it's just really hard to measure and get those colors. In general, I think it's a really fun kit to play with, but you know, I wouldn't say, oh, you need to go get this for dyeing yarn. If you would like to learn more about the food coloring kits that I was talking about, or the Knit Picks Bare Yarn bases, you can find my affiliate links in the video description. Even though I am an Amazon affiliate and Knit Picks affiliate, I did purchase all of the products myself, and this video is not sponsored by any of these companies. At the end of the stream, I rinsed out all the cups, all the residual dye, and combined it in about 4 cups of dye. I added some stroll fingering to a pot, and I then poured the dye sort of over here, and this is the pattern that we got. I have not moved it yet. Aren't you proud of me? I didn't even swish it around at all. But I am going to go ahead, and once this cools, I will wash it, and I'll share this along with all the rest of the finished dry yarns. Here is the finished dried yarn. Before I go through these skeins one at a time so we can talk about the colors that went into them, I sort of wanted to show the overview summary. A lot of the colors did look very brown when mixed together, especially the first 3, where this was before I changed the rules to only do 2 or 3 different colors. But with the first 3, the mixtures looked brown, but we really only have a brown in one of the 3. I'm pointing this out because if you mix colors together and get a brown, if you're going to dip dye to break them, you might not see brown. And I actually am really excited that we did get a brown because I think it's a gorgeous, gorgeous, and number 3, a gorgeous chocolate brown to a green. It's a very woodsy colorway. And it's a lot of fun. I did have a little bit of frustration during this live stream with the Americolor droppers themselves. On some of those droppers, I was having to shake my hand to get the drop to come out because it was so viscous that even though the droplet was forming, it wasn't going to actually drop into the water where I was trying to mix it. In all of the cases, I mixed the dye into half a cup of water. And then I had pre-soaked the yarn for around 20 to 30 minutes. I pre-soaked in plain tap water. And I added the dye to a pot with 8 cups of water and 1 tablespoon of vinegar immediately before I was about to start dip dyeing. And then after 5 to 10 minutes, I added more vinegar as needed to help the final colors absorb. As I go through each of these 9 colors individually, you will see the colors and the number of drops that I use of each color on the screen. So that way, if you wanted to try to recreate one of these mixtures, you have the recipe. These recipes will also be in the video description. Our first colorway mixed a lot of electric tones together, and we ended up with this gradient from a sort of burnt orange, almost a bricky orange, all the way through a more pale yellow orange. As far as a dip dyed gradient, this one is really, really subtle, and it's almost going to feel a little more kettle dyed. It's not very extreme, but I think that this orange is gorgeous. And I'm not a huge orange person. For this second color, we mixed 5 different colors together. And this is on the Knit Picks Wool of the Andes base. This is a yarn base that does absorb color a little slower. And we have an extremely subtle yarn here that goes from, now it's almost looking like we have a little bit of a chocolate brown down there, or it's close to brown, all the way through a more classic sort of maroon, deep burgundy type color. This is something that I'm actually really excited that we created with food coloring. There were a total of 59 drops of our mixture here, and this is a deep saturated color. So forgive me, Americolor, for saying that these colors did not feel super saturated before. This third colorway on the Swish 100% Superwash Merino base had 93 drops of food coloring. But I don't think it feels that much more saturated than the previous one with 59 drops. And this could be because the colors that went into this mixture maybe were a little less potent than the previous one, or the drop size was smaller. I'm not really sure, but we still got a beautiful, beautiful color, and in the end we did absorb all of the color from our mixture. Here we've got a chocolate, maybe a little more red than chocolate, but a chocolatey brown that goes into a green. And this is a perfect like fall, foresty, earthy colorway. For these first 3 skeins, I rolled a 6-sided die to determine how many colors to put in the mixture. But I started getting nervous, and close to 100 drops was a lot of food coloring. It took a while for the colors to absorb. So after this, I changed the rules. And if I rolled an even number, I would use 2 colors. And if I rolled an odd number, I would use 3. And so that reduced the total number of colors that we had overall. But interestingly, for the last 6, we ended up with a really close range of our drops. We ended up with between 26 and 36 drops, whereas these ones had between 48 and 93. I think the colorway from number 4 is one of my personal favorites from this bunch. Overall, this colorway is very, very dusty. We have sort of a mauve all the way through a marine blue-green, and the colors feel muted because the colors feel muted because they're not bright, but there's still a really good level of saturation here. And I mean, I think I love it because it's ultimately very purpley, but compared to a lot of purples that we've mixed in the past, this one does not seem to have a ton of the red in it. Maybe there's a bit more yellow or something that sort of tones down this color, but this almost feels neutral. And I don't know, it just has me really excited. Number 5 feels a lot like a dip-dyed Broken Mountains Violet colorway. But the pink is a little less bright, it's a little less purpley, and a little more pink. But there are some nice similarities that make this one feel very, very familiar. This yarn was on the Knit Pick Stroll base, which is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. Number 6 is very similar to number 5, and they do share one of the colors in common. It's, again, feels very, very familiar. But compared to a super saturated Broken Violet, suddenly you do see that there is a difference. Both of these colorways had the color watermelon for the red pink, but number 5 had sky blue and number 6 had navy. So I don't know, I'm a little curious why there feels like there's more blue in 5 than 6, but this is something that, you know, we'll have to play around with these blues more in the future. I would assume that the navy is a lot more potent of a color, but it's possible that the drop size between these two was vastly different. So even with approximately the same number of drops, 18 drops of navy versus 17 of sky blue, if the sky blue drops were a lot bigger or thicker, we could have ended up with more blues there. But there's also could be a difference in the speed with which I'm dipping. And so, yeah, there's a lot of little questions we could consider here. Number 7 is the brightest of the bunch that we got, where we have a very orange gradient from a bright, bright orange, safety orange almost, to more of a pale, peachy orange color. It's not quite pink, so it's still orange, but it is a more pastel version. Was there color breaking here? It did seem like it as I was dip dyeing. It seemed like there were a lot of reds that struck first, and then it got a little less red as time went on. However, oranges can be really, really hard to tell if they've broken. And on a yarn base like Hawthorne, which is 80% superwash wool, 20% polyamide, the colors start striking fast, even the yellows. So it's hard to say if there is some true, quote, breaking, or if we're just getting sort of a different level of saturation. And to me, it does look like there's more reds down at the most saturated end, but let me know what you think. Number 8 had a mixture that was almost entirely reds and pinks, and there was a lot of color. And for the first time in a long time, we saw a lot of dye crash out in the pot. I know that colors absorb slower to a blank versus the hank, because the dye has a little less surface area in the blank form. And maybe because it was a bit slower, that's why this dye crashed out. But whoa, there was a lot of pink and a fair amount of bleeding too. It took a lot of rinses, and in the end, I did get it down to like a very, very pastel pink. But with this one, I would make sure to wash it on its own a few times before tossing it in with anything pastel. You can also tell that the colors took a while to absorb by this gradient that we see. It is a gradient, but even at the darkest edge, which is darker than these midtones, but it is subtle because there's just still a lot of color in those middle sections. I'm really curious to see what this is going to look like unraveled, so I'm going to go unravel it right now. After unraveling the blank, we have two identical 50-gram balls of yarn. And the gradient will happen in the exact same place. And I think if I was gonna use the same dye mixture and dip dye a blank again, I would not get a gradient that perfectly matched this. It'd be similar, but not perfect. We've got sort of these reverse white speckles a little bit throughout, but the color gets progressively a little more darker and darker. But this is going to be stunning and a very unique, beautiful colorway. I do need to go soak this again to help this crimp relax. So that way it'll be a little easier to knit with and manage. But, ooh, it is pretty. Finally, for number 9, I used a yarn base I technically have never tried, Merino Style DK, which is 100% non-superwash merino wool. And this absorbed color beautifully. Very, very similar to wool of the Andes because it is non-superwash. But we've got these great pinks to a dusty blue-gray, green-gray. A little hard to tell, and describe that final color, but it's beautiful. And there's a wonderful level of saturation here. Last, but definitely not least, we had a lot of leftover dye, and I poured it into a pot and then did not touch the pot. I did not wiggle it. I withheld my instincts, and we got this gorgeous kettle dyed high contrast colorway. It looks like that there is a lot of white behind, but I would argue it's not quite white. It's a little less yellow than the white. Actually, maybe it is white, but it's more of a true, quote, true white versus off-white. I think that's because there was some blue left over and the barest hint of blue absorbed to some of these areas. But it was enough to sort of shift that tone a little bit in a really, really pretty way. So here we have it. 10 colorways that fate decided. We picked the colors randomly using dice rolls, random number generators, and look at these really, really beautiful tones. Again, when I did the mixing all 50 colors together, I was surprised how unsaturated that these colors felt. But now that I've played with them again, I think it's because I had consistent, normal drop size drops when I mixed those colors. And a lot of these drops are mega drops. Mega drops aren't necessarily a bad thing, as long as there is consistency. With any food coloring, what I want is consistency. But some of these colors are so thick that they probably shouldn't have had a dropper at all. It would have been better off to have had them in a vial, like a Wilton icing color, and so you could use a spoon to get the colors that you wanted, which would allow you to have a more consistent volume for mixing. Drop size aside, I think if you play with these colors a lot, you'll start to get used to them, and I am excited to explore them more. It's like a beautiful box of crayons. There's 50 shades to play with in here. The one reason why I'm not telling you to run out and buy this kit, it's the home dyer who wants to play with food coloring, their dream, it's that titanium dioxide. And if you're a cake decorator or cookie decorator, that's not a problem. That will help you get the colors that you want because your buttercreams can become a little less yellow from that white, and you can achieve some great pastels. But it does not help us when we're dyeing yarn and results in some additional washing steps. You could see, like in the live stream, just how chalky a little bit made our dye bath, and it's harder to see what's going on. I said this in the live stream, but even though it would be really fun, I'm not going to go buy the Americolor Heavenly 70 kit. I think that the negatives on this are not enough to make me never play with this again. I will absolutely play with this again. But I think if you want to play with some of these Americolor shades, it would be worth just going and buying the select few or a small kit. You know, as sad as it is sometimes that the Wilton Colorite system only has 8 colors, I think it's also a benefit that there are only 8 colors, because the drops there do have different sizes as well, but since you're mixing your colors, and they do provide some really good recipes for the color mixing, you sort of get used to the different drop sizes of the vials. Maybe, you know, again, because there's only 8. And I do really like that there are, of those 8 vials, 5 of them are not mixtures. So you have a vial that is just blue number 1, just yellow number 5, just yellow number 6, just red number 3, and just red number 40. So you can really go and experiment and play with how food colorings break on your own terms. Sure, you don't know the concentration of each of them relative to one another, but you still have a little more control there. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for joining me on these live streams, pre-ordering yarn where I don't even know what the colors will end up. It is so much fun to randomly pick the colors. Sometimes a little stressful, but ultimately I love doing these mystery live streams so much. And I have some ideas for some other ways we can randomly pick colors in the future. What do you think? What kind of random streams would you like to see? I know you guys really want to see me do acid dyes with this kind of random combination. That's a little harder because of my limited dedicated dye pot situation. But I am working on some other fun RPG type dye extravaganzas. So if you have not subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel already, make sure you're subscribed. You really do not want to miss these epic dye-along live streams. And if you are a huge fan of ChemKnits already and want to support us on a more personal level, check out the ChemKnits Patreon. It's a platform where fans can support the creators they love, and one of the perks is that you can get advance notice of the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop restocks. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching. Lucas, which one's your favorite?
I like all of them, Best Mommy, because you're the best artist in this house.
Oh, thank you, honey. But seriously, which color is your favorite?
That one, 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 and that one.